All right, guys, welcome back to another Pickled Dragon. We have, as always, the very talented Jacoya of Scale 75 and Avant Art. I did it. I said it for you this time. That way we got it in there. And I'm, of course, the Pickled Dragon. And today we are going to talk about the art of designing a small village for your fantasy role-playing games like Dungeons and Dragons and Castles and Crusades and all those great ones out there. So,
What are we drinking today, Matt?
oh gosh, you're right. We went to all that trouble, and I finished off the bullets, so now we're back to Kanish, which is a very delicious rum distilled in Barbados and devoured in New Orleans.
And I am playing it light today, playing it light and safe with a nice Kirin Ichiban, nice Japanese malty beer.
All right, well, let's kick this off then.
Do it.
So, Jacoya and I have been talking quite a bit. She is running her own group, and so I'm really excited about this particular topic because one, I'm a huge fan of all the early first edition modules, adventures, and nearly all of them followed a kind of a template of a village where the party would kind of make their base of operations, and then from which they would then launch out into their little forays and dungeons and whatnot.
Right.
And the best part about all of these little villages that they created was that they're just so easy to drop into your own homebrew campaign. But even so, some of my favorite villages, some of my most memorable gaming moments were always the villages I created myself, and it took in great part from the classics. Like taking cues from the classics for sure.
And we noticed that there's a lot of people who left a lot of comments on how to design small villages and how to design cities and other things in your campaign. So today we're going to be talking about how to design a small village. Next time we'll be talking about how to design a bigger city. So one of the first points that you want to think about when you're designing a small village is, why is this village here? What is the purpose of this village in the scheme of your whole world? Is this village more of a farming village? Is it a lumber village? Is it in the mountains and it's more of a mountainous and a mining village? And then you got to think about the background of the village, the religious affiliations that this village has. And we are going to continue to delve into that.
Yeah, so the first question you might want to ask yourself when you're designing, after you've kind of established the groundwork of the why is this village here, is how long has this village been here? Is there any notable folklore, in particular, if it's going to be a major stopping point in your campaign or a particular adventure that you're running? Is there folklore that is tied into that adventure you're running or into that campaign? 30 years ago, 5 children went missing, and all of a sudden, a first child went missing. And then, it's been 30 years and, with no problems, but all of a sudden children are going missing again. Is this a repeat of ancient evils or something completely new? Like little rumors and stories and gossip that's going to be floating around town. And that's another thing the old first edition modules got right, is they always had a list of rumors. So when you were going around gathering information around town, you could roll on charts of rumors. This person knows this. And, some of them were good and some of them were bad and some of them were absolutely wrong. So it's interesting.
So something else that we discussed is that, when you are creating your village, the way you're going to go about it, if it's a one shot versus a campaign, is a little bit different, because NPCs are going to be so much more important in a campaign than in a one shot. One shot, your players don't typically explore that much. campaigns, they like to dick around for days at a time.
Yeah, for a one shot, I mean, typically one shots are run in, like 4 to 6 hours.
Something like that.
And I know players are going to derail all day long, and they might go down rabbit holes they didn't intend it, and a one shot may not get finished in the single session that you want it to get finished in. But typically, you're going to be a lot more superficial about your design if it's just a one-off and you're done. But in a campaign where a village can be repeatedly visited, where you can have recurring NPCs and recurring themes, and and the party might want to like literally settle there. Actually, I've had party members or adventuring groups actually purchase plots of land in town, and we took the map out of the adventure and actually drew in on the map where their little house was, or little keep.
That's so cute.
And they use that village for the duration of the campaign as their kind of launching point around the world. And then they would bring back all their loot and flood the town with gold and silver.
Oh, that's so cute. Oh, so before we continue on, we want to talk a little bit about a word from our sponsor.
Yeah, this is a sponsored video.
Yeah, it is a sponsored video.
And we have a new sponsor. We'll kick it on over to dnddice.com.
I am excited to announce that Dracoya and I are teaming up with dnddice.com. That's dnddice.com. So if you head out to their website now and use promo code PICKLED, you can choose from several different sets of theme dice that they have there. Here we have their piracy theme dice. Infused in each is a little pirate ship. So you get 2d20, in case, one's misbehaving, 4d6, and, of course, the rest of the usual suspects there. And, of course, no dice company would be complete without a full array of metal dice. These are the Silver Dragon dice. You can see that they're hollow metal with silver dragons making up each face of the dice. And, of course, the pièce de résistance. We got the Tiamat D6 with a different color for each face, one for each of her heads. So head out to dnddice.com and use promo code PICKLED to pick out your new favorite set of dice.
And we're back. All right, Dice Goblins, if you haven't already raced over there to buy up all your dice, let's get back to it.
So, NPCs, when you were talking about themes, Matt, you'd mentioned that something to consider when it comes to the theme of the village is the names. There are going to be names that are a little bit more Norse in origin. There's names that are a little bit more Dwarven, so forth, so on. So you need to think about the general theme of your village.
Yeah, when I designed the villages for Days of Blight, the very first village was called Holmford. And my idea was to design the Salem witch trials for D&D, except there's actually witches. And witches being night hags. I went with all Puritan names when I designed that village, Abel's and the Shasters and like all these Puritan names without going overboard. Some of the Puritan names were pretty crazy, but you can oftentimes, if you're going for a theme, there's tons of websites out there that have, whether it's baby name websites or whatever, you could go out there and find some super awesome inspiration.
Yeah, maybe your village or your world is more of a Western but Japanese thing. So do you want something that's a little bit more Japanese in origin? You've got to just, find what you'd like, keep it consistent, and have fun with it.
For sure.
So the other thing that Matt, you had mentioned is the professions that you need in town. Every town is going to have certain professions, but not every town is going to have all of these professions. I mean, a small town, a small village is probably going to be less than 50 to 100 people as far as the population goes. So not every single profession is going to be necessary for every single village. But to list a few, we had talked about farmers, blacksmiths, carpenters, priests, bakers. Go on.
Yeah, the basically the jobs that are required for a village to function. So not every village needs a jeweler. It doesn't mean your village won't have a jeweler, but for the most part, every village is going to need a blacksmith. Every village is going to need a source of food. Every village, and once you start checking off these must-haves, you have already begun to populate the town with NPCs. And then you can start adding in the extras, extra farmers or extra laborers or whatever. But for sure, you need to make sure that this is a living, breathing town. And in that to that end, you'll need to put people there that keep the town moving and shaking and living.
Yeah. And speaking of that, you also need to think about the politics. Who makes decisions for the town? Is it the local priest? Is it the town mayor? Is there a group of are there a group of town elders? Is there a council that makes this decision? Is this like an elective thing, or is this something that people are kind of born into? You have a town elder and his son just took over, so forth, so on. Think about the politics.
And anytime we talk about politics, we have to talk about drama, right?
Yes.
I mean, it's unavoidable. There's going to be disputes over who should be in charge, over the decisions that went wrong, the decisions that went right in some people's eyes and terribly wrong in other people's eyes. And of course, all of those things, this kind of goes back to the history of the town. And we're talking more recent history where, all of those things will build up into feuds that maybe have gone on for years. There might be feuds over, who's dating who, somebody who might be jealous. And there might be two rival, not just political factions in the town, but religious factions. You might have, in Gary Gygax's village of Hamlet, there was the old religion, the Druidic religion, and then St. Cuthbert moved into town and started converting people. And of course, that creates tension. And tension, it makes things all the more interesting to a D&D adventuring group. But and this kind of goes back to the rumors that we were talking about earlier. All the rumors floating around town. If you have baked an adventure into or around your village, and you're going to have rumors floating around town that send the party to the right place. Well, you might have red herrings where they're being sent off to the wrong place. And it might be due to one of these feuds, like somebody is trying to set up somebody else just because they don't like them.
Yeah, no, yeah, and there can be old feuds, also old family feuds. Maybe there's like a Romeo and Juliet, but an evolved version where the families are still fighting. You could have political feuds. There's something else that Matt, you had mentioned is our widows and widowers. Maybe this whole town just got done with a big war, and so there's a lot of widows in this village, and there's a lot of orphans in this village. Maybe there was a plague, and so half the people died.
Yeah, and that sets the mood for the village. What's going on. Maybe the adventure is to save this village, and it might not be the overt intention of the party to save this village, but by defeating whatever evil that the party is questing towards defeating, the side effect is that this village survives. But if there's an orc war or a plague or whatever, that's certainly going to set the mood for the village. And you'll want to create not just the atmospheric quality of it, in other words, the people and the attitudes and stuff, but you'll want to create like visuals that go along with that mood. So if for example, if it were a plague, I would have it raining all the time. There's mud everywhere. Most of the plants are just getting waterlogged, and so you end up with just this dirty, messy. Everyone's cold all the time.
Everyone's sick. Everyone's dying.
Yes.
Yeah. Think about the terrain, like you said. If it's raining all the time, then all the plants are dying. There's floods going on, and maybe that's really impacting their ability to have clean water or a lot of food. Like maybe a lot of the farmlands are getting drowned out because of the constant downpour.
Yeah, for sure. And the
Also,
other,
construction of the village. You know,
oh
is
yeah,
this a hut village? Is this a Lincoln log cabin type of a village? It's just something to consider because the way you're going to create your village is different. If it's in a mountainous terrain, it doesn't make sense for you to have these straw huts. But if you're in a desert area, that makes a lot more sense. In a mountain, it might make more sense to have a Lincoln log cabin type of village. Maybe a village that was built more out of stone, even.
yeah, you know, and all of those little details will help bring that village to life for your players as they're going through. You know, I just wanted to share a couple images real quick
Oh, please, visual aids, always.
from the oldie days of D&D. This, let me go ahead and hit this proper button. Share this, we'll go here and go there. So this is the old school village of Hamlet, and this was like circa 1978, designed by Gary Gygax. And you could see he had his little blacksmith. There's an inn of the Welcome Wench, leather worker, lots and lots of farmers. But it's a small village that the party would be able to use as a base of operations to go. There's a nearby ruined moat house that bandits and brigands and something a little worse have found as a home. And but when we talk about folklore, there's also this wizard Bernie and his comrade Rufus. They were adventuring party members. They moved into the town here after slaying a green dragon, and they're building. You can see there's a tower here, and then there's this dotted line that represents castle. That represents construction of the castle that they're building. So there is a folklore here, and of course, I mentioned earlier, there's a Church of St. Cuthbert up here, and there's Druid's Grove down at the bottom here, where they that created kind of a competing religious factions. And you know, the village had its elders, its elites, the very wealthy and the very poor at the same time. So he really, and you know, I really like the village of Hamlet because Gary Gygax left so much. He filled in a lot of holes, but he also left a lot of holes for the DM to fill in themselves. Some people knocking for it, they want everything spelled out, and some people don't. But there's one more I wanted to show off, and this is Reston Ford. This was from The Secret of Bone Hill. And this isn't so much a map as it is just a piece of art that somebody did for a dungeon magazine where they revisited Bone Hill. But Reston Ford was ruled by Baron Grellis, who was later assassinated in the follow-up to the Secret of Bone Hill, The Assassin's Knot. But it's a small village, but it had a lot of commerce that went through it due to this river. So there were all kinds of merchants and so forth that would come up and down the river and stop here. There were a number of taverns, and there is a couple churches here in town, a monastery. But it's interesting because when you go to each of the individual NPCs, each of them have kind of an interesting backstory. The head of the church was kind of insane. He had actually been part of an expedition into the Underdark and had been, according to the story, mind blasted by an Illithid. And so when he came back, he was a little unhinged. So his sermons were going off the rails more and more and more.
I love that.
Yeah, and there's not a terrible amount of detail there, but there's enough for the DM to say, well, wouldn't it be cool if he was doing something terrible to the congregation, or wouldn't it be cool if his sermons were just this zealot, a fiery, what is it called, stump that where he would try to send his followers off to to do terrible things, or whatever. It gives the DM a wide open palette, but just enough information for them to be inspired.
That's really, yeah, no, that's a really great idea. So I think our last point that we had discussed was when you are creating the village, you want to consider how that party has impacted the village. How much gold they spent is going to directly impact the economy of that village. The more gold spent, the inflation will be higher. It's one thing when most of the villagers have never seen a bunch of gold before, but if your people come in and spend like 300 pieces of gold, well, suddenly there's going to be an influx of a ton of gold that people have never seen before.
Yeah, that just means, prices for everything are going to go up. Everyone's going to want their piece. Right. And again, that might create even more drama. So-and-so just got 10 gold pieces, and, the widow Ma Barker over there has nothing. And, she's selling her turnips now for 5 silver a piece instead of a copper a piece, or whatever.
Yeah.
Everything affects everything else. There's a ripple effect.
Once upon a time, I had a group that stumbled upon a village, and our DM didn't really give us any direction. So we had a satyr in the group that liked to bump into anything and everything that he possibly could. And so he rolled a nat 20 on seduction to an entire tavern. And so as a result, they had a massive orgy in the entire tavern, and it resulted in about 40 different children from this one satyr. So going forward, that whole village was going to just be multiplied with brothers and sisters.
And they're all half goat.
Yeah.
Or quarter goat. I guess it depends on what you think of a satyr.
I guess it could be a quarter goat.
Yeah,
Maybe they could just
like
be
that.
born with a tail.
There are numerous ways where an adventuring party can impact a town, especially a small village. If you think about, they're generally more simple folk. You're not going to find the 20th level paladin hanging out typically in a village. They can be easily manipulated oftentimes, depending on the village. If it's a religious community, you might have a fiery pastor that is very headstrong and determined to make sure everyone toes the line in terms of their faith, and might paint the party in a bad light if they start steering people towards orgies.
Right. Yeah. You have a lot of fun. There's a lot of ideas when you think about the small details and you consider the small details. You can have so much fun in building your own world and watching your players as they experience and explore.
For sure. All right. Well, Jacoya, why don't you take it away?
Thanks again for coming out to see us, and cheers for another round on us.